Hey everybody. So, just a disclaimer before we even start. This is not gonna be a Java hate video or video series. I've been working with Java professionally for more than 7 years now. Uh, I obviously like the language, but at the same time, I think Kotlin offers some pretty neat features, which in general yields a much more brief and safe code base. So I figured I would just share with all of you my favorite features on the language. Let's start with from my perspective, one of the killer ones, which is null safety. So what is null safety about? So if you look at this code, I think most of you are aware of basically how strings and general objects work in Java. So you define like a string, in this case, hello YouTube, and you call a function which takes a string as a parameter. And honestly, everything works as you would expect. If you run this code, you basically get the 16. No surprises here. But I'm pretty sure that most of you who worked on bigger code bases where you're calling or receiving an object which you actually didn't write, you sort of see this defensive pattern of people doing things like this. So what do I mean? Everything is fine up until this point, but I can actually do something like this. And I think you sort of know what I'm gonna go with this. Is that if I do this, well, we're gonna see obviously the famous or rather infamous null pointer exception. So what's the problem with this here? Well, the issue is that in Java, like even though actually IntelliJ and many other IDEs will tell you that, hey, possibly you're passing here a null argument, which could yield to a result, the compiler doesn't stop you. So there's no safety net built around nulls. Everybody's sort of trusted to make the right decisions. And if you look at Stack Overflow, you know that programmers in general will make null pointer exception mistakes. So what's the deal here? Well, the deal here is that in Java, all reference types are basically nullable. So you cannot differentiate between whether something is there or not. And this is where really the biggest problems are coming of. So how can we address that? Well, in Java, you see this pattern that especially if you're working with a bigger code base, you see this pattern of defensive programming. Well, engineers are just basically trying to, defend against nulls, which is fine. But then if, for example, you know for certain or the code base establishes or ensures that this param cannot be null, this is just basically an added complexity which you didn't need in the first place. So this is not that good. Obviously, there are other options here. For example, you can use something like optional, which again, not a bad thing. But the problem is, from my perspective, optional works the other way around, where you're marking an object to be optional. But the problem is, I don't think optionality is the problem. The problem is that you can never be sure when an object is there or not. So I don't think this in general addresses the overall issues. And let's see actually how Kotlin addresses the same kind of problem. So let's do something like function main, and we're gonna just basically copy what we have here. I'm just gonna copy paste, or actually not gonna copy paste this. So fun print length, and I can already do something like param, and then check this out. So I'm writing here string, and then let's print basically what we received. Param dot length. There we go. So very easy. Var hi YouTube, and then that's it. And then let's just call the method, and everything works just as you would expect. So no surprises here. But the real power of Kotlin comes into when you actually want to modify this version. So I can do something like this. And then already actually you can see an issue here. The compiler actually tells you that, hey, you cannot do this. In Kotlin, there are two types of reference types. One is a nullable and the other one is a non-nullable. And this is really a killer feature. Here, you cannot even compile this code because the compiler is saying that, hey, you're trying to assign a null value to a variable which cannot be null. Because what this hi really is that it's a string, but Kotlin basically inferred this type. But the thing is that to make this actually work, you actually need to explicitly mark this object to be a string nullable. And then you can see another problem here is now the compiler is saying that, hey, actually you need to, you said in the method that you're waiting for a string, and this type is actually saying that the parameter is always there, it cannot be null. But now you're trying to pass it a object which might be null, which eventually could yield to a null pointer exception. So that's really the power of Kotlin. Like you're gonna know the null pointer issues at compile time, whereas again in Java you couldn't really know. Like you always needed to do this defensive programming, which is not that good. In Kotlin you cannot get to null pointer exception unless you really want to. I can show you an example. So let's actually try to play around here about the options. So let's make this nullable. So now this print length function is essentially the same as we have here, right? So this is the same copy. And again, you see a new error here. And then what's the deal with this? Well, Kotlin now is saying that, hey, you're receiving a parameter which is a string or null. That's why we have this question mark. So now you cannot actually call this property because we cannot be 100% sure that the variable is there. So you can actually do a couple of things. You can do the same thing as we did with Java and then use it safely. As you can see in IntelliJ, actually this is now highlighted with green because now we know that this is not null. So that's one thing, but that's like very Java-like. What else can we do? We can actually do the safe call, which is like, hey, only execute this code if the param object is not null. So actually I can run this code, and if I run the code, I'm gonna get the result. But actually I also need to call it with null. So now if I do this, the second one is gonna be null, right? But there are other options as well. So I can do, well, this is the funny part, right? It's like I told you that Kotlin in generally, it's really difficult to do null pointer exceptions, but you definitely can, and this is one way to do so. So there are times when the compiler tells you that, hey, this object might be nullable, but you actually know that, hey, this is never nullable, don't worry about it. And the way you tell Kotlin about this is that, hey, don't worry, this is gonna be just fine. So what happens if I run this? Well, we're gonna actually see a null pointer exception. But what you really need to see here is that the only way that we could do a null pointer exception if we purposefully tell the compiler a bad information. Otherwise, this is not possible. But that's it for it now, for the video. I hope you see the idea why I think null safety in general is super powerful and really a superpower when it comes to programming. I'm gonna keep continuing making my favorite videos about my favorite features. The next one I think is gonna be data classes, so that's really neat as well. So if that's something that you would like, leave a like or a comment and subscribe. But otherwise, that's it. See you.